Something's happening. Hi. If. Get it? Imaginary friend. I want to introduce you guys to Kerney. This is my imaginary friend who
I don't see anything. I just see Daniel.
That's my imaginary friend. He's constantly with me. His name's Kerney. And he is a human made of popcorn.
Oh, that
no
sounds
more questions.
terrible.
No more questions.
Do you eat the popcorn?
No, man. You know, we just hang out. We'll watch movies together, and I'm eating my bowl of popcorn, and it's a little awkward when he's like,
"It's my body."
That's
I don't like
awful.
where any of this is going.
No.
Hello and welcome to the movie podcast review of If. My name is Shahbaz, and joining alongside me are my imaginary friends, because they're definitely not real, Daniel and Anthony. Daniel, how are you doing today?
I'm good. You know, I thought you were gonna like. I was wondering how you were going to introduce us. I'm like, yeah, I guess we are your imaginary friends. I mean, we're not in the same room right now, so how do you know we're really there? We don't know. We really
It's true.
don't.
No one believes you, and I'm like, yeah, I'm just friends with Daniel and Anthony. They're like, dude, you don't have any friends. Stop
Those
talking
sound
about
like
them.
real names. Those
Yeah.
aren't real names at all.
Those are fake names. And my other imaginary friend here, Anthony. Anthony, how are you?
I'm one of those imaginary friends that's just confused.
It's how I was during this movie.
We're all each other's imaginary friends. Does that just void us of being alive? And
We're just not existent at that point.
Yeah.
It
Yes.
just voids us of being friends with one another. I think that's what it is. It all cancels each other out.
Did you guys ever have imaginary friends like growing up? Like, I mean, I don't know what Anthony's answer. I feel like we already know, but we'll let him marinate on that.
Yeah. And he's like, I didn't have an imagination.
First of all, having an imaginary friend is not
Not allowed in
having
Italian households.
It's not having an imagination. You can have an imagination. Having
true.
an imaginary friend usually leads you to a therapy session in the later years as you grow up and you grow older.
There you go.
So
Good thing we all go to therapy.
truthfully, I never had an imaginary friend. I talk to myself a lot, even as an adult. There's a lot of like the inner dialogue, talking to yourself. But I had a big imagination growing up. So a lot of my toys that I would work with or Legos that I would build, that's kind of like where my imagination went. I never really imagined another being that I would connect with and talk to.
Really quickly though, you just said you put your toys to work. What? I just want to
Like, in the sense, like,
let's
Like if I
develop
was
that
building
further.
something, or if I was imagining a scenario.
reenacting a scene, 100%.
Exactly.
I got
So I'm
you.
putting them
Yeah.
to work. Like they know they work for me. So
Yeah.
that is that's how I put them to work.
The Godfather
There you
household
go.
over here.
They just punch in and punch out at your house. I did not have really an imaginary friend. I'm in the same boat as Anthony. I feel like maybe when I was younger, I would pretend that there's someone there. But I did bring an imaginary friend to today's episode. So I want to introduce you guys to Kerney. This is my imaginary friend who
I don't see anything. I just see Daniel.
that's my imaginary friend. He's constantly with me. His name's Kerney. And he is a human made of popcorn.
Oh, that
No
sounds
more questions.
terrible.
No more questions.
Do you eat the popcorn?
No, man. You know, we just hang out. We'll watch movies together, and I'm eating my bowl of popcorn, and it's a little awkward when he's like,
"It's my body." I
That's
don't like where
awful.
any of this is going.
No, I don't like. But here's the thing. That's Anthony's big imagination working right now, and he's putting my imaginary friend to work. So I appreciate that.
It's
He's
true.
on brand.
He's
It's
putting
all
him
on
to
brand.
work. That is
Shay,
what
how about
Anthony
you?
does.
Did you dabble with the ifs growing up?
No, I also was not a man of the if. I never had like a creature that I saw or a thing that I like associated with. I think
Could
kind
be
of
a
similar to
person
you
too,
guys.
man.
Could have been a person. I think that's even. I think it's scarier if it's a person. If imagining like
Yeah.
Ryan Reynolds in my house or something like that, that's kind of weird. No, I kind of like you guys. I would just like I would maybe talk to myself, or if I'm creating a scenario as a kid, I would like act it out. But like never did I was like, oh, this is John. Like this is my imaginary friend John. always with
Meet
me.
George. Don't mind him.
Yeah.
He likes wearing overalls. It's all
Yeah.
good.
Why is it that when we were kids that was okay, but if I were to say, guys, this is John, and there's no one there, we are now looked at as you need to go get some help.
You need to go get some help. Yeah, I don't know. I think because they're not real. I think that's like the thing, you know?
Yeah. I mean, when you're a kid, a lot is accepted, right? I mean, when you're a kid, you get away with a lot of things. So That's just, I think, just the nature of the business of kids business. You know what I mean? You have that world, and then you leave that world at one point.
That's true. You leave that world at some point. And that's what this movie is all about, really. It's about losing that connection with our imaginary friends. And of course, it is directed by one of the greats, John Krasinski, also written by him as well. And as a stacked cast, you have Ryan Reynolds, John Krasinski. I'm going to read these names, but my goodness, is there a lot of people in this movie. Fiona Shaw, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Gossett Jr., Alan Kim, Liza Colón-Zayas, Steve Carell. And then literally there's a game you can play while you're watching this movie of who's doing that voice. Because every if is voiced by someone famous from this entire Hollywood scene here. So a lot of great names out there. And of course, I want to give a huge shout out to our friends over at Paramount Pictures Canada for inviting us to come watch this movie, and also for allowing the movie podcast to also, I guess you could say, start the film. We got a chance to introduce the movie. It was a really cool and fun experience as well. So we are now embedded within the if, I would say.
We are now somebody's ifs, 100%.
Oh, I don't know if I like that though. I don't know if I like that. And of course, if will be in theaters May 17th. So either it's already out and you're listening to this on the way to the theater, like, what do these guys think of the movie? Because that's what you probably sound like. Or maybe you don't sound like that.
I think that's what an if sounds like, man.
That's what an if sounds like. Yeah. Maybe your if is listening to this. Do ifs listen to the podcast? If so, give us 5 stars. Join our Discord. Follow us on social media if you have a phone. If you have a phone.
It's a long pause.
Okay.
That's a long pause.
It was an okay
long
joke.
The imaginary people, whoever there, are clapping for you, Shay.
Oh, Anthony! I feel like we need to take Anthony out right now because he is seeing things. That's not good.
When it's a Monday night, you start seeing things.
Oh man, dude, it's Wednesday, man. You're so off. No, I'm just kidding. Of course, Daniel, please kick us off with your first reactions for If.
If going into it, I think this was a film that we had a lot of reservations going into it. I think the first couple trailers that we saw for it were like, okay, this looks very different. This looks very interesting. I think the name as well too is one of those things where like, okay, we're in a time right now where we're getting a lot of just small word movies. Like we had Nope, we had If, and there's other ones that are escaping my mind right now. But seeing the first trailer for this and seeing the concept of it, we're like, okay, imaginary friends, they're real. They're trying to be reunited with the people who had them as kids when they had lost them. I really love that as a concept. And there is so much in If that I truly do love. And I love, first and foremost, that John Krasinski wanted to write and direct a film that he was going to leave to his daughters. Like, this is my kind of love letter to you guys. Because you look at A Quiet Place, both those films, very different films that you're leaving. And again, the center of those films is family, and they're very scary, but they're not kids movies. So I love that he wanted to make a film that leans more into the kid side of, exploring these themes of leaving childhood, embracing, young adulthood, and like leaving those childish things behind. And going into this film, I think it looks beautiful. It's shot gorgeously. It reminds me very much, like, it has like an Amblin feel to it a little bit. And Cailey Fleming, who plays like Bee in this film, she's the lead of this film. I think she does a really good job of carrying a lot of this movie and making us feel exactly how she's feeling. She wears that on her face throughout this film. But my biggest, I think, issue when it comes to If is the story itself, because there is so much going on in this movie, and you're constantly being introduced to new ideas, new ifs, new scenarios that in isolation, these scenes are really nice scenes, or they'll have a really heartfelt moment. Or as you see in the trailer, there's the scenes of all the ifs coming together and putting on a show and having these fun moments. But when you're looking at the parts as a whole, you're like, okay, what is the story here? And John is also not only writing and directing and producing, he's also starring in this film as himself. He is not a voice actor. He is the father in this film. And you're like, okay, there feels like we're underdeveloping to the main plots of this. What's going on with John's character and, you know, the purpose of the ifs, because we're left with the movie where we're kind of struggling to be like, okay, where is the purpose? What is the story of this movie? Yes, there's a lot of great moments and there's some generally like emotional moments in this film that I really enjoyed. But when I was looking at it overall, I was left wondering, okay, what is the purpose of the story? And I'm left with a lot of questions. And we know it's been a while since we've spoken about this. If you're a longtime listener or watcher of the movie podcast, when you're starting to question the reality of the world that you're in, you're like, okay, I'm a little confused. Could they see this person? What happens? That they could see them, but they can't see them? Like, there's a lot of those questions. And I know a lot of this movie, you're supposed to just kind of go on feeling, but that will only get you so far because the pacing of this film is very slow, and you're going to start to feel it by the end of this film. And again, it's under 2 hours. It's about an hour and 45 minutes or so, but you definitely feel that by the end of it. Like I said, I think Ryan Reynolds is used really well in this film as well too. But I just wish that there was more of a coherent story that really kept me invested throughout, because, you know, the sum of its parts, unfortunately, doesn't live up to the potential of what the idea was for If.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Daniel. I think a lot of this film is just very disjointed. It just feels like an amalgamation of different scenes kind of coming together, because there were so many moments where I was like, wait, how did we get here? And like, what is going on? Like you mentioned, you have these two plots that are very underbaked. And I feel like they could have been a perfect marriage and really told a really fantastic story. But they're kind of off doing their own thing. And a lot of John Krasinski's scenes in this movie kind of feel like reshoots, almost as if like we need to tie this in somehow, or we need to give this movie a bit more of an emotional weight. And a lot of it just doesn't kind of make sense. And like you said, we're kind of left questioning a lot of the logic in this movie.
And that's the thing. The ifs themselves, I actually really like the character designs. And I think that's something going into this movie I was worried about. I'm like, there's a lot of different character designs. There's a lot of different art styles. But this movie is generally a really beautiful looking movie. And you look at the cinematographer, obviously, Giannis, who's worked with Steven Spielberg on like everything since like Jurassic Park or Schindler's List. So it's like this guy has been around. He knows how to light things and shoot things. It's a generally really beautiful movie. And all the ifs, the imaginary friends, looked really great on screen. I think Steve Carell's character is the only one that Blue is stood out a bit because he is so large and he's purple and he just obviously sticks out. But going into this movie, the thing that I think was going to pull me out the most is what drew me in the most, actually, was these characters. And I just wish we had more time with them to spend with these characters and learn more about them, because a film that this is supposed to be, you know, skewed to a younger audience, this feels like it's starting to handle a little bit more mature themes. So I'm left wondering, is this a film for kids? Is this a film for young adults? Is this a film for adults to remember what it felt like to be a kid? I think there are, you know, pieces of all of those, you know, audiences in this film. But overall, I think because you are trying to cater to so many audiences, you're left wondering, like, who is this actually for?
Daniel hit it on the head with what is the purpose of this story? What are we getting into? Because there is a purpose. We see it, but how it's told on screen and the story behind it is not the clearest vision for it. I think there is, we were talking about this after we watched it, there is a story here that if you were to re-edit, it would probably tell a better story. But it's the pacing, it's the length of when we are introduced to these characters, and then we're introduced to these imaginary characters, how they blend in with one another and how they go about their day. It just felt very convoluted. And I kept thinking, like, if I was a kid, would I understand what I'm experiencing right now? And it was a situation where there are really colorful moments and you see these crazy characters on screen, where as a kid, I'd probably be like, ooh, that looks interesting, but what am I missing here? And I think maybe the story got ahead of itself. Maybe John Krasinski, you know, you are coming off A Quiet Place and Quiet Place 2. So you have a little bit of this momentum of, well, let me continue evolving storytelling and evolving how I make movies and do it the way I want to do it. But it just felt like it almost got ahead of him, where he couldn't control what was what he was trying to tell. Because a lot of times I looked at Shay and say, I don't understand how we're in this situation. I don't understand what is exactly happening on screen. And when you start questioning these scenarios that are happening, you start to wonder, did you always have a clear vision for our characters, or was it just something that you were building as you were directing and as you were shooting?
We need more of a payoff or a build up to it, right? Because there's so much of it. We're left wondering, okay, how did we get here? You're so right. How did we get here? How do we fill in these gaps a little bit more? Because so much of it feels like it's either coming too late in the film. Again, great moments, and it's not a cynical movie at all. It very is an endearing film, but exactly what Anthony's saying.
It is very much a well-made movie. It's just how we are told this story. You just kind of wonder, I don't think the payoff is there. And a lot of it is us, like during the movie, I was trying to understand like who's real, who's not real. Is the father real? Is he not real? Like, because of the way he's positioned and put in this story, he was trying to have this payoff at the end, and it never really connected with me. It never really had that, that Sixth Sense moment where it's like, oh, that's what it was. And
yeah,
or like this Pixar heartstring tug moment, that you really hope to get. I don't think this movie has that.
I think the vision, what we got on screen, might miss the mark for a lot of people.
Yeah, I have to absolutely agree with you. I think there's moments that I thought would be really fun in this movie. I thought when we'd see the ifs all kind of in writing, I think, like you said, Daniel, the character designs are fantastic. But I think they don't really have any fun gags that they kind of pull off. I think what you see in the trailer is kind of what you get with them in this movie. And I think when you look to like Pixar, for example, whenever they have a fun or interesting looking character, they're able to play off that a lot. A lot of these celebrity voices that are kind of thrown in just feel like favors to John, that are like, hey, yeah, man, of course. Yeah, like I'll show up, I'll do an hour's worth of recording for you, because again, they're not really doing much in this movie other than showing up for these random scenes. And then there's that logic that's always being questioned as well of these ifs and their former children. And then you have the main character in this movie who doesn't remember her if. And I'm like, okay, but you're only 12 years old. Like, your if was only a few years ago at most. Like, how do you forget what your if looks like? I don't know. It's just these things that you start to question about this movie, where you're kind of left wondering, like, what is the point of this film and what is going on in this movie as well? A lot of it also kind of just felt like they shot this during like the peak of COVID, because it felt like they only had 6 sets that they could choose from, because they didn't really go far into New York City. If they didn't say that they were in New York City, I would have just thought this is like another made up city that's meant to look like New York. And also you have maybe like 8 actors, or maybe even less than that, who are always in these scenes. And you kind of wonder, like Anthony said, is everyone imagining in this movie because you're only seeing the same people over and over again? A city of millions just feels like it's not very lived in. And that creates this illusion of like, what am I supposed to believe when I'm watching this movie? And then when the payoffs are happening at the end, they just never feel like they hit. I never felt that emotional moment in this movie. And I was really hoping that Michael Giacchino's score would be the one that really pushed and elevated me along. When this movie started, the score kicks in and there's an opening sequence. And I thought, I'm like, wow, this movie's so beautiful. I'm really, really enjoying it. Then about like 10 to 15 minutes in, it just kind of started to feel a little long, and what's going on, and we're just really taking a very, very long time to get to what the point of this movie is. And the score starts to kind of just repeat itself a little bit too, where you're like, okay, I think I've heard this already. Give me something more now. Give me something that pushes the movie along, because it all just starts to feel like one big snail's pace of a movie.
I think because we mentioned Cailey, or B, the main lead of this film, she's 12 years old. She lost her mother in this world. So I'm like, okay, am I supposed to, I guess put together that she doesn't really have an imagination as much anymore? Is she trying to like be an adult? It's because she's left that world behind, and now because now her father is sick, she's kind of going down this path, and that's just kind of us putting it together. But I feel like in this film, I wish it committed a little bit more to each of the story that I was trying to tell. If you're telling a story about somebody who's lost their mom, and maybe losing their dad, we need to develop that story a lot more so we could feel like we are at risk the entire film. If she's constantly going to the hospital and, she'll just check on her dad a little bit, John will just be like, hey man, what's going on? And then that was it for John in that scene. He's like, he may have one or two words.
John is probably the best dad I've ever seen on screen. Just because he's so hopeful and he's so like the guy's hiding and he's doing like these amazing things. I'm like, I so charming. Couldn't picture a father so like devoted to his daughter, and I know that's like it's just the world that we live in. You just don't see it.
We'll unpack that another time.
But like, it's just like, wow, is he real? It's so. He's such a good character, right? He's like, oh my god, he's such this magical person, and that's it. And like, I'm thinking of like, how Pixar treats like the emotions in Inside Out. I'm like, it would have been nice to see the ifs have a certain skill sets that we got to see them used for whatever whatever issue they're going through, and we get to see those the skill sets used. I wish we got to lean more into John's story, but yeah, I wish it's weird to say that I want a kids movie to be sadder, but I kind of did, because we as people who have been raised on Pixar films, as kids who have had a whole repertoire of Pixar films growing up, I think they are capable of having a little bit more of a mature story. And If is a more mature, it's not, it's hard to really classify it as a kid's film, but I wish it leaned into a little bit more of the actual emotion itself, because I think the payoffs would have been a lot stronger and we would have felt a lot more of a connection to the characters. But the ifs themselves are all really fun to see. I really liked Fiona Shaw for the scenes that she was into. But yeah, I just wish that there was more for us to really, sink into in this movie and really connect with these characters for it to be a new family, like timeless classic, right?
Yeah, there's a lot in this movie that I think it tries its hardest to make itself work, but I think the end payoff is where it kind of loses you completely. Is there anything else that you guys want to touch on before we jump to our final recommendations? Nope. Awesome. Anthony, let's kick it off with you. Give us your final recommendation for
I recommend you add it to your queue, but if you have a family, this might be a family movie that you guys can go watch and enjoy.
Yeah, so it's definitely not a date movie.
Definitely not a date That's movie. What I was trying to say. It's definitely not a date movie. Sorry, I was looking. There was a spider right up on the ceiling, and I kind of lost track.
I don't know, man. That's your
well, if it jumps on my face, it's not imaginary.
Bites you. I don't know. I still don't believe it. For myself, I was really tossing it around. Like I think a lot of people were just going to have a great time with this movie because it is just a fun looking movie. And I think you can kind of look past a lot of these issues that I have with the movie. But I think for myself, I would say skip it. But I think that there is an audience there that can go watch it. So maybe add it to your queue for most people.
I'm perfectly balanced between both of you. I think the audiences will like this film. I think there's some really great themes in this. And I think when you're having like discussions with your kids about loss and moving on and dealing with those type of things, If does a really good job of presenting those ideas for those conversations to follow the film, obviously. But I would say add it to your queue, check it out when it's on Paramount Plus later this year. And I think it's a film, if you do decide to go out and watch it, it's definitely more of a family film. So catch it with your family. And I think you'll have some good discussions with them afterwards.
Thank you very much. Again, I want to give a huge shout out to our friends over at Paramount Pictures for inviting us to come watch this movie. If will be exclusively in theaters May 17th, and you can tell us all about this movie by joining our Discord. You can go ahead and see all the show notes down below. You can leave us a comment below as well. You can give us a thumbs up, give us 5 stars or wherever you can listen to us, because, hey, it really helps us keep the lights and the mics on. Of course, there's more movie podcast stuff coming out. Stay tuned for a lot more cool interviews. And
sorry, just like there's a lot more movie podcast stuff coming out.
There's a lot of movie podcast stuff coming out. Man.
We just
stay
can't.
tuned right here.
We're like If right now.
I know. We just can't say it. Like
it's imaginary. It's all imaginary.
All the stuff that's coming out is imaginary. So you just gotta stay tuned. That was This Time with the Movie Podcast, and we'll see you next.